When my parents called me at 2 in the morning, they did not ask how I was or whether I was awake. My mother said my brother would lose everything unless I wired $15,000 before sunrise. My father said family came first the way he always did, right before stealing something from me. I almost sent it. Then my phone rang again, and a detective asked why my name was attached to 3 business accounts. Tell me where you are watching from and stay with me. I had lived in Phoenix for almost 6 years by then, far enough from Tulsa to hear my family more clearly. Distance does that. When you are inside a house full of excuses, guilt feels like truth. When you leave, it starts sounding like manipulation. I worked as a senior fraud analyst for a regional bank. It was not glamorous, and my mother loved reminding me of that. You stare at spreadsheets all day, she used to say, as if numbers were embarrassing. Your brother builds things. He creates jobs. He has a real future. My brother, Travis, did not build much of anything except debt resentment and the illusion that he was always one big break away from proving everyone right. My parents worshipped him anyway. He was charming in the shallow, exhausting way some men are. He could walk into a room with mud on his boots, late payments on his truck, and 3 lies already loaded in his mouth, and my parents would still look at him like he had descended from heaven carrying a business plan. I was the practical one, the one who remembered due dates, who paid back loans, who packed school lunches when my mother spent all afternoon helping Travis prepare for some football banquet. The one who worked through college, bought her own first car, and learned early that being dependable in my family meant being useful, not valued. So when my mother called me at 2 in the morning, voice trembling just enough to sound urgent, my body reacted before my mind did. Nora, she said your brother is in serious trouble. My father came on next, already irritated, as if I had inconvenienced him by not fixing it yet. 15,000, right now. We only need it till Monday. Only, that word had financed half my adulthood. Only cover his rent till next month. Only help with the insurance lapse. Only co-sign this one truck. Only lend your card till the client payment clears. Only talk to the bank because you understand those people. Those people, meaning responsible adults. I sat up in bed and switched on the lamp. My apartment was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the weak vibration of my phone against the quilt. What happened? I asked. There was a pause. My mother filled it too quickly. It is a payroll issue. Travis has a temporary cash flow gap. A temporary cash flow gap at 2 in the morning. Then why are you calling before sunrise? I asked. My father exhaled hard. Because if the money is not in by opening, everything gets worse. Equipment can be seized. People can start talking. We are trying to protect the family. The family. In our house, that phrase always meant Travis. I was about to say no. I could feel it sitting in my throat, sharp and overdue. But then my mother used the other family language, the language designed to drag me back into my assigned role. If your grandmother were alive, she would never let your brother drown like this. That almost did it. My grandmother, June, had raised me in all the quiet ways my parents never noticed. She taught me how to balance a checkbook, how to read a contract, how to tell the difference between generosity and surrender. After she died, she left me her small rental duplex on the north side of Tulsa. It was not flashy property, but it was stable, fully paid off, and the only thing in my life that had ever come to me without strings. Or so I thought. Before I could answer, another call flashed across my screen from an unknown Oklahoma number. I have another call, I said. My father snapped. Do not hang up on your family. I did anyway. When I answered, the voice on the other end was calm, clipped, and impossible to misread. Miss Nora Bennett. Yes, this is Detective Elena Ruiz with the Financial Crimes Unit in Tulsa County. I apologize for the hour, but I need to verify whether you opened or authorized 3 commercial accounts in the names of Hollow Oak Supply, Red Mesa Logistics, and Bennett Asset Recovery. My skin went cold. No, I said. Absolutely not. She asked a few more questions. Had I recently signed business documents? Granted anyone power of attorney? Shared identification tax records, or digital signatures with family members or business partners? The last question hit something buried and ugly. 3 months earlier, My parents had asked me to send copies of my identification and an old signature sample. My mother claimed the insurance carrier handling my grandmother's duplex needed updated beneficiary paperwork because the property was still tangled in estate administration. I had laughed at the time and told her there was no estate issue. The duplex had transferred cleanly to me years ago. My mother said the carrier was incompetent. My father got on the phone and made me feel dramatic for questioning it. I had emailed the documents. Detective Ruiz must have heard the silent stretch. "Ms. Bennett," she said more gently. "Now, it looks like someone used your information to create business accounts that received contract deposits and were then rapidly drained. We also found your name tied to a line of credit secured against real property." "What property?" Another pause. "The duplex on North Sheridan." I do not know what sound I made. It was small and ugly, and not something I had heard from myself before. "That is my property," I said. "No one can borrow against it without me." "That is what concerns us," she replied. By the time we ended the call, I had learned just enough to stop breathing normally. Someone had opened 3 business entities using forged formation documents, a falsified operating agreement, and a digital authorization that resembled my signature closely enough to pass basic review. Money had entered the accounts through prepaid supply contracts connected to Travis's construction company. Then the funds had been moved out in fast transfers to vendors that might not exist. And the duplex? Someone had used it as collateral. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall until the room blurred. My parents had not called because Travis had hit a random rough patch. They had called because something was collapsing, and they needed me to plug the hole before I discovered that they had built it out of my name. I did what fear always makes me do. I got methodical. I turned on my laptop. I pulled every email my mother had sent in the last year. I searched property records. I accessed my credit reports. I downloaded archived statements from the tiny local bank account I had once kept open in Tulsa, because the duplex rent had been deposited there. There it was. For months, rent had been arriving and leaving in patterns I had not approved. Then the deposits stopped altogether. A home equity line appeared in account notices I had never seen, because the mailing address had been changed. There were service charges from a commercial registered agent, legal filing fees, and wire transfers to 2 companies with names vague enough to hide in plain sight. One charge made my stomach turn. Executive Travel Suite. Travis had been telling everyone that business was so tight, he was barely staying afloat. Yet someone using money tied to my identity had paid for luxury lodging in Dallas, then a private event tab in Scottsdale, then a jeweler in Tulsa that I knew with terrible clarity my mother would insist must be some mistake. I called the local bank branch and woke up a manager who was far less annoyed than I expected. The words fraud analyst opened doors. So did the strain in my voice. By dawn, I had frozen what I could, flagged the most recent transfers, and requested copies of every authorization form attached to the accounts. When the documents arrived in my secure inbox, I felt something inside me settle into a colder shape. The signatures looked like mine if you had only seen them once. The address listed on 2 filings was my parents' house. The emergency contact on one account was Travis, and the notary stamp on the collateral document belonged to a woman who had attended church with my mother for 20 years. It was not one desperate choice. It was coordinated. It was planned. And it had probably been happening for longer than I understood. At 7 that morning, my mother called again. I let it ring, then ring again, then again. Finally, I answered. "Did you send it?" she asked. No greeting, no shame. "No," I said. Her voice sharpened. "Nora, this is not the time to be stubborn." I looked at the forged collateral paper on my screen. "No," I repeated slower now. "This is the time for you to tell me why my duplex was used to secure debt, why my name is on shell accounts, and why a detective called me before sunrise." Silence. Then my father took the phone. "You are overreacting." That sentence, that Holy Family sentence, the sentence that had buried every wrong thing they ever did under my supposed tone. I stood and walked to the kitchen window. The desert light was just breaking pale and colorless. My coffee maker clicked on automatically cheerful and absurd. "Am I?" I asked, then explained the forged signatures. It was temporary, he said. Not denial, not outrage, not confusion. A confession wearing work boots. My mother came back on crying now, but there was calculation under it. We meant to fix everything before you ever knew. Travis had investors waiting. The property was just leverage. We were protecting all of us. I laughed, and it hurt my throat. All of us, I said? You took my property? You used my identity? You changed my address? You drained the rent? You called at 2 a.m. because you thought I would still act like the family emergency fund. My father's voice turned to stone. If you go to the police, you will destroy your brother. No, I said. He did that himself. I booked a flight to Tulsa before the call ended. I was not going home to save the family. I was going home to see how much of my life they had already sold. Tulsa, in early spring, always smelled like wet dirt and old memory. The air was softer than Phoenix, heavier too, as if every street held on to what people wanted forgotten. My parents lived in the same broad ranch house where I had grown up, the one my father still described as the heart of the family, even though nearly every good thing that had happened there had been performed by women cleaning up after men. My mother had already texted me 3 times by the time my flight landed. Every message followed the same pattern. Come straight home. Do not speak to anyone first. We can explain. People are already talking. That last one told me more than the others. I did not go to the house. I went downtown to meet Detective Ruiz. She was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes and the expression of someone who had heard every excuse before breakfast. She had spread documents across a conference table by the time I arrived. Incorporation papers, transfer logs, loan records, vendor invoices, and copies of notarial certificates. You were right not to send money, she said. There was no comfort in hearing it. She walked me through the timeline. Travis's company, Bennett Ridge Renovation, had been bleeding cash for at least a year. He had taken advances from clients for custom commercial work and failed to deliver. Instead of scaling back, he opened side entities to route deposits through accounts that were harder for creditors to monitor. My identity gave those accounts credibility. My clean credit history helped secure short-term financing. The duplex made excellent collateral because it was unencumbered and titled to a person who lived out of state. Meaning me. Meaning convenient. Your father appears on several communications as an authorized contact, Ruiz said. Authorized by whom? That will be one of the questions. My mother's church friend, the notary, had already been interviewed. Her story was changing. The registered agent claimed he filed what he was given. One of the vendors attached to the transfers had no physical office. Another was linked to a post office box rented under the maiden name of Travis's girlfriend from last year. I should have felt shocked. Instead, I felt a terrible clarity. They had not singled me out because I was weak. They had selected me because I was reliable, organized, geographically distant, and conditioned to clean up quietly. That afternoon, I went to the duplex. The front porch sagged slightly on one side, just as it always had. The azaleas my grandmother planted still leaned pink against the fence. But inside, something felt off. The left unit was empty. The right unit still had tenants, a retired school librarian named Mrs. Hollowell, and her nephew, a nursing student who worked nights. They both recognized me immediately and invited me in with the kind of awkward sympathy people use when they know more than they wish they did. Mrs. Hollowell did not even wait for tea. Your mother told us there were ownership changes, she said. Then your brother started coming by for cash pickups. We stopped paying him after the notice on the door looked strange. What notice? She reached into a drawer and handed me a folded paper. It was a typed instruction claiming all rent should be paid to Red Mesa Logistics due to portfolio restructuring. Portfolio restructuring. For a duplex my grandmother bought with 20 years of cafeteria wages and night shifts. The paper listed an email address I had never seen, but the phone number at the bottom was Travis's old business line. Mrs. Hollowell lowered her voice. He said if we told you there would be legal trouble because you were in some kind of debt situation. I stared at the page, then folded it carefully. That was a lie, I said. I know that now, she replied. I am sorry. I was not angry at her. Fraud survives by making decent people doubt their instincts. When I finally drove to my parents' house, the sun was low and mean, throwing long gold bars across the yard. Travis's truck was in the driveway. My mother opened the door before I knocked, like she had been stationed there waiting to perform innocence. She looked fragile in the way she always did when she needed forgiveness more than truth. Her eyes were swollen. Her lipstick was too bright. Behind her, I could see the dining table already set as if this were a family dinner and not the beginning of a collapse. "Nora," she said, reaching for me. I stepped back. That hurt her. Good. My father stood in the entry hall with his hands in his pockets, face arranged into stern disappointment. Travis was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, jaw tight, acting angry because panic was less humiliating. I set my bag down and took the folder from under my arm. "No one talks over me," I said. "Not once. You had your turn." My father scoffed. "This is ridiculous." I placed the collateral form on the dining table. "This is your signature as witness," I said to him. "Then the notarial certificate. This is your friend Dana stamping a document she either did not witness or should be disbarred from touching. Then the account summary. This is rent from my duplex diverted into an account using my name. Then the vendor transfer logs. This is money moved into fake suppliers while Travis told the family he was having a rough quarter." My mother sat down first. Travis pushed away from the counter. "You do not understand how business works." I turned to him. "You used my identity to open shell entities and borrowed against my property. I understand exactly how that works." My father slapped the table with his palm. "Enough. We did what we had to do to keep this family afloat." There it was again. The word family stretched over a crime like a cheap blanket. "No," I said. "You did what you had to do to keep Travis from facing consequences." My mother started crying harder. "Your brother was under pressure. You left. You built your own life. We were trying to hold things together here." The cruelty of that almost impressed me. I left. Therefore, they stole from me. I crossed my arms and looked at all three of them. "You changed my mailing address. You intercepted notices. You took rent from the property Grandma left me. You forged my name. You told tenants I was in debt. You called me in the middle of the night for more money because the fraud was unraveling. Which part of that would you like me to call love?" Travis moved first, quick and stupid. He grabbed the account papers from the table and crumpled them. "That is enough," he said. "You always wanted to make me look like the screw-up." I laughed once without humor. "Travis, you managed that without me." The shouting started then. My mother blaming pressure. My father blaming banks. Travis blaming market swings, jealous competitors, clients who promised funds, and me somehow for living too far away to understand the stress he carried. I let them burn themselves out. Then I told them the part that changed the room. "I already met with financial crimes," I said. "The accounts are frozen. The duplex debt is under review. Tenants have been interviewed. The bank has the forged records. And if one more dollar moves, it becomes even easier to prove intent." For the first time that day, my father looked afraid. Not remorseful, afraid. My mother whispered, "You went to the police," I answered when they called me. Travis cursed and shoved a chair back hard enough to scrape the floor. "Do you have any idea what they will do to me?" I held his gaze. "Less than what you did to me, I hope." I had planned to leave then, but my father made one last mistake. He looked at me with that old contempt, the one I knew from childhood, the one that appeared whenever I stopped being useful and started having a spine. "You have always been cold," he said. "This is why no man stays with you. You care more about being right than about your own blood." There are sentences that break a person, and there are sentences that free one. That sentence freed me. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and pressed play. I had recorded the last 6 minutes. Every justification, every admission, every use of the words temporary and keep this family afloat and borrowed against it and pressure and what they will do to me. My mother actually gasped. "You recorded us." "Yes," I said, "because unlike the rest of you, I learned." Travis lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. "Touch me," I said quietly, "and the assault charge goes in with the fraud file." He stopped. I sent the recording to Detective Ruiz before anyone could speak again. Then I looked at my mother. Her hands were shaking in her lap. Her mascara had started to run. A younger version of me would have folded at that sight. A younger version of me had folded at that sight for years. Not anymore. Grandma used to tell me that the truth does not need better timing, I said. It just needs someone willing to say it out loud. Then I walked out. By morning, half the extended family knew some version of what had happened. By noon, the polished version my parents preferred had already started spreading. Nora is overreacting. Nora is bitter. Nora is trying to ruin her brother. Nora has always been difficult, which told me exactly what I needed to know. This was no longer a private family disaster. It was a war over the story itself. And for the first time in my life, I was done letting them write mine. If you have ever exposed the person your family depends on, pretending is innocent, you already know what happens next. Truth does not arrive in a quiet room and receive applause. It enters a system built on denial, and that system fights back like it is trying to survive. Within 2 days, my parents had turned their grief into a campaign. My mother called relatives one by one, crying so hard she could barely form sentences, which made every lie sound holy. My father took the practical route, telling anyone who would listen that I had misunderstood routine business paperwork because I worked for a bank and saw crime everywhere. Travis texted cousins' old classmates and even a former youth pastor saying I was having some kind of emotional collapse after years of resentment. It would have been almost impressive if it had not been so familiar. They were not just protecting themselves. They were using the oldest weapon in our family. If a woman tells the truth and the truth makes a man look small, call her unstable. By the end of the week, I had received messages ranging from cautious concern to open accusation. Why are you doing this publicly? Could this not have been handled inside the family? Your mother is devastated. Travis says the property issue was a misunderstanding. You know your father has blood pressure problems. That one almost made me smile. Apparently forged loans were survivable. Consequences were not. I rented a furnished studio near downtown Tulsa and extended my leave from work. During the day, I met with Detective Ruiz, a civil attorney named Paula Vance, and a title fraud specialist recommended by my bank's legal department. At night, I sat at the tiny kitchen table under yellow light and built a timeline. Dates, transfers, calls, filing records, mailing changes, photos of forged signatures placed beside real ones, rent diversions, jewelry purchases, hotel charges, copies of the recording, screenshots of texts in which my mother asked for identification under false pretenses. Every detail had to connect. Every detail had to stand on its own. I knew too much about fraud to rely on outrage. Outrage makes people feel innocent. Documentation makes them accountable. The first ally came from the most unexpected place. My cousin Leah knocked on my studio door on a rainy Thursday evening, carrying a paper bag of takeout and the expression of someone walking into a minefield on purpose. Leah and I had grown up together for a while before adulthood spread the cousins out across marriages, jobs, and careful versions of ourselves. She had always been the one who watched quietly at family gatherings, saying little missing nothing. She worked in hospital administration, had 2 sons, and a low tolerance for theatrical men. She stepped inside, set the bag on the counter, and said, "I do not think you are lying." That almost undid me more than the betrayal had. I laughed softly. That is a very moving family endorsement. She gave me a tired half smile. It is better than what you are getting from most of them. Over cold sesame noodles and the cheap sparkling water from the studio fridge, Leah told me what had been happening in the background. Travis had been borrowing money from more people than I knew. Not just my parents, not just vendors. He had taken short-term business bridges from an uncle, a church elder, and the father of his former fiancée, Mallory. He had promised each of them a different timeline and a different source of incoming funds. My father had personally vouched for him every time. My mother had told people I was comfortable enough that the family property question was already handled. The family property question, I repeated. Leah rolled her eyes. That is how your mother described your duplex at Easter. She said it was part of a broader family strategy. A broader family strategy. I wrote that phrase down. Before Leah left, she slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. What is this? I asked. A list of people who might know more than they are saying. There were 6 names on it. Mallory Crane, Travis's former fiancé. Harold Pike, former bookkeeper for Bennett Ridge Renovation. Dana Mercer, the notary and my mother's church friend. Evelyn Ross, neighbor and unofficial keeper of street gossip. Deshaun Reed, subcontractor, not paid for 3 completed jobs. Pastor Glenn Iverson. I looked up. Leah shrugged. You are not the only one he used, she said. The second ally arrived the next morning in the form of anger-wearing pearls. Dana Mercer, the notary, called me herself. I almost did not answer, assuming it would be some weak attempt to coordinate stories. Instead, I heard a woman unraveling. Nora, I need to speak to you in person. Your mother lied to me. We met at a coffee shop far from her church. Dana looked pale, overcomposed, and furious in the way only humiliated people can be. She had indeed stamped the collateral document, but she swore she had been told I had already signed remotely and only needed witness confirmation for estate refinancing. It was still misconduct. She knew that. The problem for my parents was that fear had finally overpowered loyalty. I thought I was helping your family clean up paperwork, she said. Then detectives asked why the signer was never physically present. And your mother said if I admitted anything, it would ruin all of us. There it was again. All of us. The plural mask that hides private theft. Dana gave me copies of text exchanges with my mother. In them, my mother coached her on dates, phrasing, and what to say if anyone asked questions. One message made my hands shake. Please do not mention Nora was out of state. Frank says it only confuses the bank girls. The bank girls? I handed the phone back slowly. Would you be willing to provide this formally? I asked. Dana shut her eyes for a second. Yes, I should have done the right thing before. By afternoon, Paula Vance had added Dana's text to the civil packet. Detective Ruiz had her own copy for the criminal side. Then came Mallory. She was harder to reach. Travis had hurt her publicly and repeatedly, and I suspected she wanted no part of anything with our family name on it. But when I finally met her in a parking lot outside a garden center, she surprised me by arriving with a banker's box full of folders. I kept records because he always made me feel crazy, she said before we even sat down. Turns out, paper is better than memory when a liar is involved. Inside the box were printed emails, invoices, credit card statements, and a draft operating agreement for one of the shell entities. Travis had once tried to convince Mallory to sign as a managing member for Optics. She had refused after noticing my name in an attachment labeled Collateral Contact. I asked him why your information was there, she said. What did he say? That you knew. That you were the family backer and preferred staying quiet. I felt my face go cold. He had not only stolen from me, he had used my silence as part of the disguise. Mallory also brought something else, voice memos. Old ones. She had recorded arguments after Travis kept changing his story about incoming funds. In one, he complained that my father was dragging his feet on finishing the property paperwork. In another, he said with infuriating confidence that I would not blow up the family over a building. A building! I could still hear my grandmother's keys jingling as she came through that duplex gate after double shifts. To him, it was a building. To me, it was the only inheritance not poisoned on arrival. Or so he had thought. My alliance grew quietly after that. Harold Pike, the former bookkeeper, agreed to meet after learning I was not trying to save the business. He had quit 6 months earlier when asked to backdate invoices for materials that never existed. He still had ledger exports stored on an old external drive because, as he put it, I did not want to die being the only idiot in the room. The ledgers showed advances coming in payroll being delayed, and money redirected into the shell accounts before circling out through coded vendor payments. Deshaun Reed, the unpaid subcontractor, brought copies of completed work orders and furious text threads. He had been told client funds were delayed while Travis posted photos online from a luxury suite in Dallas. Deshaun had not just anger. He had chronology. He knew exactly when labor had been done and what was still owed. Even Evelyn Ross, my parents' next-door neighbor, contributed in her own gossipy way. She had no formal records, but she had camera footage from her porch showing Dana's car at my parents' house on the exact evening the forged collateral documents were dated. She also had footage of Travis unloading boxes from the duplex garage weeks before I had any idea something was wrong. Inside those boxes, I later learned were old lease files, repair receipts, and archived tax records, all useful for impersonating an owner. By the time Sunday arrived, my studio looked like a war room. Legal pads, sticky notes, highlighted transcripts, printed screenshots, audio files labeled by date. Paula Vance came by in person and stood over my kitchen table for almost an hour, organizing the evidence into separate lanes: criminal exposure, civil recovery, title restoration, defamation risk, emergency injunction. "There is enough here to build real pressure," she said. "But pressure makes people sloppy. Be careful. The more trapped they feel, the more likely they are to shift blame or hide assets." "Can they still hide anything?" She gave me a level look. "People who have been protected for years do not suddenly become rational when consequences begin." That turned out to be prophetic before the day was over. That evening, my mother sent a group message to nearly every relative on her side of the family, inviting them to a prayer dinner for healing and reconciliation at the house on Tuesday night. The wording was elegant wounded and manipulative enough to qualify as one of her best works. She said the family had been shaken by accusations and misunderstandings and needed to come together before outsiders destroyed what belongs to us. Leah texted me a screenshot with one line beneath it: "This is not dinner. This is narrative control." She was right. My mother wanted an audience. My father wanted sympathy. Travis wanted time. And someone in that circle still believed they could drag me back into silence if enough people watched. So I did the only thing that made sense. I decided I would go. Not alone, not unprepared, not as the daughter they trained. I would go with copies, witnesses, and more truth than the room could comfortably hold. At that point, I still believed my biggest danger was the family I had been born into. I had not yet learned that betrayal had already entered my new alliance too. And when it surfaced, it would nearly hand my parents the victory they thought they had lost. The prayer dinner began exactly the way my mother planned. The dining room lights were dimmed to a warm glow. A pot roast sat in the center of the table, as if forgiveness could be plated beside potatoes and gravy. My mother wore soft colors and red eyes. My father stood behind her chair like a silent pillar of wounded authority. Travis paced near the window, rehearsing a look that was meant to resemble humility. Relatives filled the chairs and lined the walls. Cousins, uncles, 2 church members, even Pastor Glenn. It looked like a tribunal disguised as family support. When I stepped inside, the room fell quiet. My mother rose slowly and clasped her hands. "Nora," she said softly, "we are so glad you came. Tonight is about healing." I set my folder on the table. "Healing requires truth," I replied. My father cleared his throat. "Let us keep this respectful." Respectful. The word hovered in the air like perfume covering rot. I opened my folder and began laying out documents. The forged collateral papers, the rent diversion logs, the vendor transfers, the recorded conversation transcripts. Murmurs spread around the table. Before I could continue, someone stood. Leah. For a second, I thought she was about to support me. Instead, she spoke with a hesitant voice that cut through the room. "Nora, maybe we should slow down." My stomach tightened. She looked at the others before continuing. "I have seen some of these documents, but maybe they do not prove intent. Maybe this was just poor communication." Poor communication. My mother lowered her eyes as if deeply wounded. Travis looked relieved. My father folded his arms. The room shifted. Suddenly, the evidence felt smaller. "Nora." Leah continued carefully. "I know you are upset, but accusing your parents of crimes in front of everyone might cause damage that cannot be undone." There it was. The betrayal. Whether fear had gotten to her, or someone had pressured her, or the weight of family had finally bent her spine, I did not know. But the effect was immediate. My father leaned forward. "You see," he said calmly to the room. "Even Leah agrees this has gone too far." My mother dabbed her eyes. "We only tried to help Travis keep his business alive." The relatives nodded slowly, relieved to accept the softer version of reality. My chest felt hollow for a moment. Then I remembered something my grandmother once said while fixing a broken cabinet hinge. "Truth does not collapse just because someone steps away from it." I closed my folder. You are right about one thing, I said quietly. The room leaned closer. These papers alone are not enough. My father smiled slightly. That smile lasted about 3 seconds. Because at that exact moment, the front door opened, and Detective Elena Ruiz walked in. Behind her came Paula Vance, carrying 2 thick legal binders. My father's smile disappeared. Pastor Glenn stood up abruptly. My mother whispered, "What is this?" Detective Ruiz placed a badge gently on the table. "This," she said, "is an investigation that has already begun." The room exploded into overlapping voices. Travis cursed. My father demanded explanations. My mother began crying again, but the narrative had shifted, and this time it was not theirs. The room fell silent again when Detective Ruiz opened the first binder. Inside were copies of financial records, email exchanges, witness statements, and digital authentication reports. She spoke calmly without drama. Over the past week, we have gathered substantial evidence related to identity fraud, unauthorized collateralization of property, and diversion of funds through shell entities. She placed a printed ledger on the table. This record comes from the former bookkeeper of Bennett Ridge Renovation. Harold Pike's name was at the bottom. My father's jaw tightened. Ruiz continued, "These transfers correspond with deposits routed through Hollow Oak Supply and Red Mesa Logistics." Another sheet slid across the table. This notarized collateral agreement was signed without the legal property owner present. Dana Mercer shifted uncomfortably in her chair across the room. My mother stared at her. Then came the final piece. A digital forensics report confirming that the forged signatures were traced to Travis's laptop. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Travis slammed his hands on the table. "This is ridiculous. Anyone could have accessed that computer." That was when Paula Vance spoke. "And anyone could have sent those emails from your private account, too." She projected a message onto the television screen. The email read clearly, "Use Nora's property as leverage until investors arrive. She will not challenge it." My father turned pale, but the final turning point had not arrived yet. Detective Ruiz nodded toward the doorway. Another man stepped inside, tall, composed, carrying a briefcase. "My name is Daniel Hart," he said. "I represent the title insurance company responsible for reviewing the collateral loan." He placed a certified document on the table. "Earlier today, the title company concluded its internal investigation." He looked directly at my father. "The loan secured against Ms. Bennett's property is legally void due to fraud." Gasps filled the room. Daniel continued, "In addition, the title company will pursue civil damages against anyone involved in the falsification process." Then he turned to me. "And Ms. Bennett will retain full ownership of her property with immediate protection against further claims." The weight lifted off my chest so suddenly it almost hurt. The trap had finally closed. Travis stared at the evidence like a man realizing gravity exists. My father sank slowly into his chair. My mother whispered the only thing she had left. "We were trying to save the family." Detective Ruiz's voice remained calm. "You are committing financial fraud." The investigation moved quickly after that night. Travis was charged with multiple counts of financial fraud and identity theft. His business collapsed within weeks as creditors reclaimed equipment and contracts dissolved. My father faced civil liability for his role in authorizing the collateral paperwork and facilitating the shell accounts. His retirement savings were drained through settlements and legal fees. My mother lost the social standing she had spent years carefully cultivating. Church friends stopped calling. The quiet sympathy she expected never came. The truth had replaced the story she tried to control. The duplex was restored fully under my name, the fraudulent loan erased. Mrs. Hollowell and her nephew remained tenants, and for the first time in years, the property felt peaceful again. Leah eventually apologized. She admitted that my parents had called her earlier that day, begging her to help calm the situation. Fear had made her hesitate in that moment. Trust does not rebuild instantly, but honesty is at least a beginning. Over the following months, my life slowly reshaped itself. Leah became part of my support circle again. Mallory joined us occasionally for dinner, laughing now about how absurd Travis's promises had always sounded. Deshaun finished the renovation projects he had been denied payment for and sent me photos of the completed work with quiet pride. It was not the family I was born into, but it was something stronger. A chosen family built from people who respected truth more than appearances. And the greatest surprise of all was how peaceful life felt once I stopped trying to earn love from people who only valued obedience. Tonight, if you are still listening, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the person in your family who finally told the truth? Did people accuse you of betrayal when you were really protecting yourself? Tell me your story in the comments. I read them and I promise you are not alone. If this story meant something to you, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear that justice and self-respect are not selfish choices. Thank you for being here, and I hope your own story leads you toward the kind of peace that only truth can bring.